Hi everyone. Firstly, thank you so much for joining us this lunchtime. I know the sun's come back out, so the fact that everyone's kind of joining us on YouTube on a Monday afternoon is much appreciated. This is the first event in our PrideFest 2020 calendar. Obviously, we're all a little sad that we can't be partying physically through Pride, but the And Proud team have been working tirelessly to bring this week to life in everyone's homes virtually. We have a great agenda of events coming up featuring voices from Clear Channel, from Co-op and G-Work, and an incredible conversation tomorrow with Channel 4 on diversity and inclusion. For those of you who have absolutely no idea who I am, I'm Libby Darley. I'm the co-chair of And Proud, our LGBTQ plus network here at Dentsu Regis Network. And I'm joined today by Markus Carlson, National Communication Manager at Jaguar Land Rover, and Mike Buckley, Head of Partnerships at Attitude magazine. Hey both.
Hello.
Hello. We're going to kick off the conversation today. Feel free to comment in the live chat section if you have any questions, and we'll come back to those at the end of the discussion today. But before we get into that, I'm going to call on people a little bit more technically adept than me to play a little video showcasing the great partnership that these two businesses have forged over the last few years.
Since 2016, Jaguar has partnered with Attitude through its groundbreaking sponsorship of the Attitude Awards. For 2019, Jaguar wanted to build on the success of the partnership and meet new creative objectives. Jaguar used Attitude's experience, reach, and trust amongst the LGBTQ audience to create content that meets Jaguar's desire to position itself as a brand supporting diversity. To reach socially conscious consumers, Jaguar utilised the Attitude Magazine Foundation to create the Attitude Jag Race video campaign. The video campaign was created and produced by Attitude and delivered across their social media platforms. The campaign was amplified by Jaguar and the featured talent on their own channels. The first of 3 episodes went viral, receiving 2 million views, beating the average audience for BBC Drag Race UK. Total press coverage saw 233 articles seen by 4.57 million people, which is worth £13.7 million. The third and final episode of Attitude's Jag Race premiered at the 8th Annual Attitude Awards at the Roundhouse in London. At the event, Jaguar were able to immerse all 650 guests through an interactive activation and sponsorship of 2 awards.
So it looks like a pretty awesome project to be a part of. Markus, starting with you, where did this all start?
It's from almost a bit of a random place, you'd think. It all started back in 2016 for us, with was nothing then more than a request via our PR team to see if we could engage with Attitude Awards. At that time, as a bronze sponsor, 1 in 7, I believe it was in that year, where we had the opportunity to engage for the first time as an automotive brand with a proper LGBT publication. Obviously, being part of LGBT myself, and some of my colleagues, I was very excited about the opportunity to do so. So we managed to get the business on board already back in 2016, and we have then been able to evolve this over the past few years together with Mike and the team at Attitude. But it obviously takes many twists and turns before we are where we are today. So the past 4 years have been hard work in making sure that we can stay authentic, that we can develop the partnership in the right way and right manner, make sure that we walk the walk, so we don't just advertise, we don't just put rainbows on things, but instead make sure that we organize our own business. We have nearly 40,000 employees in this country alone as a business, so that's the size of a small town. So actually, to make sure that our own town is in order, that we have the right supports internally and anything else before we start screaming on the barricades in support of LGBT. We've made sure to really encourage our own business to take the stance. And then fast forward to last year, where I had opportunity, and we've had this idea growing for the past 3 years of a play on words of a automotive drag race, which is the most petrol head fuel thing you could possibly imagine, with the RuPaul's sort of drag race idea, and fuse it to, it was a play on words. It was just too good to not happen. And we decided to do it as authentic as you can, and we donated £20,000 to various LGBT charities, which were charities of the talent's choice. So the various drag queens that were competing for their own charities, which is very nice. It means we get a split between local charities in the Northeast, but also the more sort of globally recognized charities like Stonewall and the Albert Kennedy Trust. So probably if I head over to Mike, he can explain a bit more about his view of how the partnership has evolved.
And it was bound to happen, but one of us is on mute.
Sorry. So yeah, it was, as Markus said, back in 2016, for a small independent publisher like Attitude, it's still fairly rare for a brand of their magnitude to kind of come to us without quite a lot of work going on proactively from our point of view. So we were kind of delighted to have that first reach out from the PR team about Jaguar supporting the Attitude Awards. First and foremost, purely from a commercial point of view, it's always nice to get extra revenue into an event like that. So clearly that's always, that was always a great win for us to start off with. But when you then kind of scratched under the surface of it, this was Jaguar, a brand that you wouldn't naturally have assumed, particularly at that time, would be fairly diverse. So it was great that they kind of wanted to come on board and support the event. We had worked with a car partner in the past, but Jaguar was kind of the first luxury car partner that the magazine had ever partnered with, I think even from print campaigns over the 20 years that it's been around. So it was really great for them to kind of get in touch with us. Also for something like the Attitude Awards as well, when you're part of doing an event of that scale is you're transporting VIPs and winners and presenters and members of the press to and from the event. So it's always great to have a fleet partner on board. So we certainly appreciated the PR team support with that. As it kind of progressed after the first year, as Markus mentioned, they were silver sponsors. What was really exciting was it was clear that they really wanted to collaborate on the partnership. And I think to this day, we've never, in the history of Attitude, we've never had a partner that's really done that from the ground upwards, creating 100% unique creative for the magazine and for the event, even before we got to Jag Race, was something that just kind of showed the investment that Markus and the team were prepared to do. So yeah, it's been a fantastic journey, and long may it continue.
Obviously, when you think about, Jaguar Land Rover, or you think about brands that are really operating in the Pride space, maybe Jaguar Land Rover isn't the first one that would spring to mind. Kind of, where did that ambition stem from, Markus?
So Jaguar, as I'm sure most of you who are watching this and the people on the panel, all will have had a similar view of Jaguar. And I dare to say, if I asked you to describe a Jaguar owner, or what you think a Jaguar owner is, then I believe you would all say, either you say, oh, my dad used to have one, or even worse, my granddad used to have one. And you might say, oh, I really like those, but it's all rooted in the kind of preconception that it's driven by an older, usually white man, who plays golf and smokes cigars. But that's not the intent of the brand, and it's not where the brand has been evolving. So those who have been closer to the brand, which unfortunately is also 95% men-ish, are only the ones that were aware that Jaguar has rejuvenized, has got a model lineup fit for 2020, and are doing all these amazing things around anything from sustainability to evolvement into battery electric vehicles, all of these elements where we are very progressive and much more so than many other businesses, but we will still have that perception of old white man. So to kind of shake that off, we're looking at all sorts of ways where we can appeal and show our diversity in a more physical, tangible form. One way of doing that is to engage with the LGBT community, which not only opens up, obviously, advertising to the LGBT community, but it also shows us as a more progressive business in totality. So, for instance, we know that from our paid activity on the Jag Race videos, that the majority of the people viewing that, so about 60% of people viewing it, were women. And we know that there were women who were affluent. We know that there were women who are on the market to buy a car. And actually, when we look at some of the kind of key results we had back from that, because we did brand uplift studies on all the paid activity around it, we could see a 30% uplift in what we call brand favorability. So that is obviously enormous for something that is relatively small scale compared to if we run a multi-million pound TV campaign or anything of that. Because essentially we have promoted things directed to people who had a preconception of Jaguar being for old white men, and here we are showing that no, we can have fun. We can have a drag race with drag queens if we want to. And I think anyone watching that will know that that's not just the kind of marketing initiative you can do because you have a fun marketing department. Actually, to be able to allow to do that, you have to have the entire business support to do so, to do it authentically, and to do it with donations and everything else. So to get all this off the ground, we made sure to really go the whole way. So we've had full-on board approval for this, which is something normally for a marketing campaign of this scale, I'd hardly even have to ask my senior manager for buy-in. But because of the kind of I suppose social magnitude of what we're doing and what it means as a shift change for Jaguar, we make sure to have the whole business behind it, and we have our chief financial officer excited watching it with his daughters and wife, and it's quite incredible to see, and the results therefore also speaks for themselves. I already mentioned uplift in brand favorability, but we also had a 31% uplift in purchase intent, which, as you can imagine, is a very big thing when you want to shift perception amongst women and potential future female buyers. So not only has this worked for us to advertise within the LGBT community, but also on a broader scale to be seen as a diverse and inclusive business, which we fully are. And the reason it's taken us 4 years to get to the point of Jag Race is to make sure that we did get all of our houses in order, that we've since we started in 2016, we have joined Stonewall as an active member, doing the Stonewall Equality Survey every year, on which we have action points, and for each time we've done it, we have improved. As you'd expect, any new business falls further down the chart. But we've been climbing that, we're implementing anything from policies of transitioning at work, for instance. We have policies around parental leave for same-sex couples. So we have the up to 1 year full pay, even if you're a same-sex couple, which is in many businesses only for kind of maternal leave normally. Yeah. But to make sure we don't discriminate, even if it's two fathers, we have policies like that internally, which does really help. And I think it's very important as a business to make sure you do that, and you don't just wave the rainbow flag and sing praises to the gay network during June, but actually you do it outside of June. You do it meaningful. You do it internally. You can fix things internally first, and then you can talk about it authentically. So in year one, we had a very small involvement with Attitude Awards, and our advertising wasn't around, here we are supporting the gay community or anything like that. Our advertising then were, oh, look at this, here's some things I think you would like you normally would with advertising. Year two, our LGBT network is set up. We have some policies already started internally. Okay, so now we can show a bit more support. So we can we had a campaign that we then ran called Be Your Own Animal, obviously play on words again, with Jaguar being an animal in itself and a car brand. And we know within the gay community there's lots of tribes of shapes and forms, and there's been all these loosely labeled debates that were going on a couple of years ago. So we joined in on that with a play on word of Be Your Own Animal. So if you want to lose the labels, you can lose the labels of bears, otters, and anything else that we like to call ourselves within the gay community. So it's a fun play on word on that, and we kind of continue that on. We furthered our involvement with Stonewall, our involvement with Attitude. We, along with Virgin, are now the only sponsors of Attitude Awards. So we essentially asked to take a larger part of the event itself, to have a larger support, make the event itself feel more premium and more sort of in line with an event of similar magnitude, but from, you'd almost like see more sort of well-known heterosexual brands. So if you imagine Vogue or GQ Man of the Year awards, so those kind of big awards, so our aspiration working with Attitude is to have an event very much at that level, where it's not seen as the gay thing. It's actually, no, it's a premium award. And actually, as you can see, we have two strong British brands supporting it, Virgin Atlantic and Jaguar. And I think that's a quite important sort of symbolic thing for brands to do, to show that there's a equal worth in an LGBT award as there would be for another publisher's award or BAFTA, or whatever it might be that other brands would happily sponsor.
I mean, it's obviously, it's music to my ears to hear of a brand speaking about weaving communications in with everything else that's happening at their business, and bringing that to life through a campaign that clearly is, you speak about it with such pride and such kind of passion, but also it's had noticeable impacts on your business. That brand favorability score and purchase intent score speaks for itself. Mike, kind of as a publisher, and particularly a publisher so actively involved in this space, and dedicated to this space, what role do you think publishers have to play in helping brands kind of also embody that kind of full cyclical approach to communications?
I think it's kind of like a two-way street. It's all around the word collaborating. Attitude's been in existence now for 25 years. So we know LGBT, we know our audience, we know our readers. I've had shocking experiences over the years of brands coming to Attitude and with the best intentions and wanting to support the community, but then doing it in a very ham-fisted way. I won't mention any names, but there was a cruise company that came and yes, wanted to support us. And this was just through either just placing their print campaign with us, and all the advertising, all the materials that came through were double page spreads of heterosexual couples on board a cruise ship, so a man and a woman in all their creative, which clearly just would not resonate for our audience. So if that brand had kind of come to us beforehand and done very much what Jaguar has done and talked to us and let us collaborate with them, and we could have kind of avoided those mistakes. You know, it's needless to say that that campaign didn't work, and we lost out because the brand didn't come back again. So I think from a publisher's point of view, we've got to also educate brands as well. You know, it can be a bit of a minefield. Everybody does have, or at least most people do, want to come with the best intentions. So I think we can just help and support and best guide brands through the LGBT audience. You know, it's kind of crucial. It's almost like the movement has moved on to Black Lives Matters. You know, that's really important for brands as well, to make sure that they're just not jumping on a bandwagon, but they're really, you know, really engaging with the Black community before they go out there and do things. So I think that's what we have as a publisher. We have our advice and our experience that we can, you know, use to help a brand along that pathway.
I mean, you mentioned kind of recent events then. I think we are all kind of very aware at the moment that there's probably more focus on diversity inclusion than ever before. And I think people are talking about it more than ever before. You know, that might be because we're all sat at home and we're all feeling very kind of different about the world that's happening around us.
Yeah.
I have a question to both of you, but I'll start with Markus. What advice would you give brands wanting to talk more in the diversity space and kind of get involved more over the next 6 to 12 months?
I think twofold. I think on the one hand, especially if you work in the marketing department and you're not part of the LGBT network or part of LGBT yourself, and even if you are, reach out to any LGBT network existing within your organization, and if there isn't one, see if you can find one elsewhere within your industry. There might be an industry body, for instance, that you can contact, or there are several other sort of institutions that will be more than happy to help in some form of consultancy capacity. There are several people I know who do it for a living in terms of consulting businesses on how to speak authentically and how to start their involvement. But I'd say start with asking the questions of what people internally want for the business, because they have a very different view of what you want from a marketing perspective. And then you also have to ask yourself and the rest of your marketing team, kind of what's the business objective of it? What is it we're trying to go to and from? Because we always have to still remember that whilst we do good for good's sake, we're still all working for various businesses that in some shape or form has to make a living and survive, probably more so now than ever, during furlough times and stopping of manufacturing. Anything that's going on in sort of the current world, it's even more important to make sure that we allow our businesses to flourish. So therefore we have to align what those internal objectives are with whatever external objectives we have in terms of business growth, in terms of brand perception. Am I representing an FMCG brand that actually I need to see quick return on my investment from selling a juice? Then you might want to have a slightly different stance on how you engage with the gay community as well, because then you might want to support a large event like a Pride, like Brighton Pride or something like that, where you have a large volume of people who can quickly engage with, but then carry that on through the year with a publisher like Attitude, or there's several other sort of LGBT titles you can work with as well, in terms of having that continued support outside of Pride months, because it's an easy thing to jump on a Pride event, but that doesn't make it any less important, because the Pride events would only exist with the monetary support that brands can give them at the moment. At least if you want the Prides we've known to love recently, where there are the kind of bigger festival styles with music artists and drink stores and everything, all of those things, because all of those things are paid for by the support of businesses. So yes, I think for those businesses where it makes sense, definitely should support and look at what their local or best Pride would be to support. Make sure that they support their internal network. If there isn't one, maybe to set one up, to walk in the parade or whatever they might want to do. So I think it's two questions. What does our business want to do internally, and what can we do to change internally? And then what's our business objective? Do we need to sell more products tomorrow, or do we need to strengthen our brand and change our perceptions, or whatever other objective you could possibly have?
And what about you, Mike? What would you kind of say on the media side of things?
My advice is almost back to Marcus's answer to the first question, which was about how Jaguar went on the journey with the Attitude Awards. You know, it starts off relatively small. My other job, I'm also head of partnerships for Brighton Pride. So probably one of the biggest, most high profile things you could do as a brand is be a headline sponsor of Brighton Pride. It has a huge audience in the UK and globally. My advice probably would be to a brand, perhaps not do that as your first kind of toe in the water with the LGBT community, because it's highly visible. It's, you know, if you make any mistakes, and it's such a high profile event, then they will kind of become quite clear. So as Markus mentioned, start off small, and also doing some kind of audit, as he mentioned, you know, looking at your own business practices, and how you treat your employees and your customers that are LGBT as well. I think that's really important. We did have a fashion brand with Brighton Pride a few years ago that partnered. They were bringing out a Pride t-shirt range. They were donating money to some LGBT charities, which was all fantastic. They got all those right, tick, tick, tick. But then the product itself was actually made in, I think it was Malaysia, where homosexuality is illegal. So it's a think about that supply chain as well. And then actually when we dug deeper with that brand, they actually did have contracts with their suppliers in that country, Malaysia, where the suppliers had to agree that no staff was discriminated against sexuality and gender and things like that. So they were doing something quite small, so I think we were still able to support it. So I think you have to be very, very careful within things like your supply chain, how you kind of treat customers and also your staff internally. I think that's really quite crucial. I would think if you do want to partner, giving something back as well financially. You know, the LGBT community is often you know, experiences the worst kind of numbers in terms of homelessness, those kind of things. So if you are able to do something that supports a charity in the field, I think that's always a great thing to do as well. And then this is probably just a personal thing, but I like brands that kind of really do like the fight. So I think we all probably saw the Yorkshire Tea and the Black Lives Matter social thing recently, you know, where that brand is basically saying, we don't, you know, you're a racist, we don't want you to buy our products anymore. I kind of like brands that will go as far as that, you know, which shows that they're 100% committed. So yeah, that's just a bit of a personal thing, but you know, I think, you know, really willing to put your money where your mouth is great for the brand.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that point, and that's not just as a proud Yorkshire girl. Coming back to Jaguar Land Rover and I mean, the way you guys have worked together over the last kind of 5 years, what have been the highlights for you both? Is there a particular piece of work or even just a particular conversation that you've been the proudest of? Mike, I'll go to you first.
I think it comes down to Jag Race for all sorts of reasons. That is kind of a huge pinnacle. Not just with Jaguar, but I think in the history of Attitude, you know, it's a brilliant campaign. I wish that we could take all the credit for it, but it actually did come from Markus and others at Jaguar. It was their suggestion to do the whole kind of, you know, the idea of drag queens, drag racing in Jaguars for charity. That was their idea that they gave to us. Hopefully we did a good job from that point running with it. It came out, you know, there was quite a lot of great alchemy with it. We ended up, we knew that the Vivian, who was one of the 4 contestants in Jag Race, we knew that she'd done really well in the UK version, but we didn't know that she had won. She didn't know herself at that point when we filmed it. So to have the eventual winner of the UK version was great alchemy. And the fact that the first episode got more views than the average number of views for the UK drag race season. That's also a great kind of win from my point of view. But also for Jaguar to trust Attitude to content, to generate that content for them. We've always done things, obviously. We've done advertorials and we've done other video campaigns, but nothing of the scale and the size of Jag Race. So it was great that they trusted us to do that. So yeah, it kind of all does come back to Jag Race.
Markus, would you agree?
I definitely would agree. Jag Race is sort of the pinnacle of progress from internally and externally to get to that point. 3-year journey, the sort of surrealness when you on a old landing strip in the middle of absolutely nowhere in, I believe, Leicestershire. I might even be wrong in the Shire, but I think it was Leicestershire, and it's 35 degrees warm. We managed to pick the 2 hottest days of the year last year to film this, and you're walking along a landing strip surrounded by fully made up drag queens that kind of in all makeup and wigs. It's literally melting, so you're in and out of air condition to try and shoot the content and make sure and keeping our electric cars on charge, because we're competing in the all electric Jaguar pace to sort of further the whole sort of debunking the myth that you can only drag race with high usage petrol vehicles. Actually works very well to do it in an electric car, as shown, and in heels. Not that we condone driving in heels, obviously. But as a piece of content, it was a very proud moment, because I remember showing the concept at first and the early cuts of this to our chief financial officer, literally in a one-to-one meeting with him, trying to explain first of all what RuPaul's Drag Race is, because he'd never heard of it before. And I think seeing the interest in someone who so clearly have no clue of what we're talking about is really inspiring, because this is someone who general perception would say middle-aged white man finance officer. Like it's as far away from what you normally expect a supporter of Drag Race is. But he saw this content, thrilled by it. Actually, it's a great initiative, and I'll try and I quote him as well as I can, but he said, if I could spend all of my money this way, I would. This comes from the chief financial officer. You normally, he'd complain if you expense a tea too many.
I mean, that's testament to success right there. Just getting your CFO to agree to just keep spending money, just keep doing it.
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of open a couple of the questions that have come in on the chat, and guys, please keep adding the questions in that live chat if you've got anything. But Andrew wants to know whether either of you, but I think more so Markus, whether you came across any resistance in getting this kind of campaign over the line, either internally or with other parts of the business at Jaguar Land Rover.
Yeah, I think naturally in any business, especially a large corporation like ours, you'd always find resistance. In this case, it wasn't any form of hostile resistance. It wasn't, oh, I don't want to see drag queens and Jaguars. There was never the question from any party internally, but you always have, in any business, there are so many managers between me and our CEO, all of which have to sign off various things, all you sign off. But I think in many cases, people aren't used to content like this. They can all get nervous and say, oh, can you make sure you get buy-in from so and so and so. So it's, I think that's natural. Anything that's innovation and new and sort of playing in a white field is going to have a level of hesitance, and people wanting to have other people's views to see, is this really the right thing to do? I can imagine Money Supermarket would have had it many times with the guy, there was a builder guy dancing in heels along the road, which I believe is the most complained about ad ever in ASA. But it's an amazing piece of advertising. And I think often you have that. If you're going to make something really, really good, really innovative, you have to be prepared to have a discussion about it. In some cases, you might even have a somewhat hostile discussion, but I'd like to think in 2020, you'll see far fewer of those in modern businesses, especially in the UK. If you work for a global business working lots with the Middle East, do I think my Middle Eastern colleagues would play this content out? Most definitely not, because it wouldn't even be legal to show in the Middle East. But that doesn't mean that us as a business can't have that content, and anyone who lives in the Middle East that access our UK accounts or go onto UK websites, they will still be able to see it, and they can see that us as a business support this. It's not hidden anyway, it's on our website. We have a dedicated page on our jaguar.co.uk website for our Attitude partnership. That's alongside our partnerships with Wimbledon and Formula E racing. So it's up there for us as any other partnership. It's not just kind of a marketing ploy that we do. And I think, yeah, you'll always have a bit of hesitancy and resistance to get to that point. But I personally haven't received any sort of, you'd imagine, homophobic comments or wouldn't want to do that, or that makes me uncomfortable. It's more, it makes me nervous. That you can get, and I think that's perfectly fine. And I think it's our job to calm any nervousness down.
Mike, what about kind of your experience from the attitude and the publisher side of things, like, you know, brands that you've worked with, you know, prior or even kind of during the relationship that you've had with Jaguar Land Rover? Have you kind of seen brands that have resisted or had hesitance at all?
I wouldn't say so much that. I think sometimes the community will challenge brands that, you know, that they see might be pinkwashing. So it's kind of what Markus talked about. A brand that will come along for the month of June, stick a rainbow on something, you know, do little bits here and there because it feels like a tokenistic gesture, that the right thing that they should be doing. I think that's probably what we've seen at Attitude, where people have challenged before. All the research that we do, and we've researched that we've done specifically with Jaguar as well, it's always kind of the high 80% of our readers support brands that actually do stuff like that, surprisingly. So they will support brands, and they do like to see brands in Attitude advertising or in other media, gay media. So generally the community is supportive, but I think there are a minority out there that do want to see a little bit more going on in the back room as well. So a little bit more support to the community, whether it's through supporting charities. So I think that's probably more the resistance that we get. You know, that there will always be brands that people won't, you know, particularly think are gay friendly, and they would challenge that. I don't think those brands would necessarily then come and advertising Attitude. So not really something we've experienced yet.
Another question from the audience. I didn't think I'd ever find myself saying that. A little bit more around the creative side of things, and this comes in from Lee. How should we approach creatives to ensure ads are more inclusive for the LGBTQ plus media?
I think you have to make it part of your overall vision, and not necessarily writing LGBTQ plus down as your objective for everything going forward. Because after all, we all just part of the world. We all equal members of the world, and we all want to be seen and heard. But I think it's important to make sure that diversity is part of your core vision in your marketing strategy, and it's something that if you have everyone has to have 5 points or 5 stages or 5 something that they strive towards over the next year or 2 or 5. And I think it's important to make sure at least one of those points is singling out diversity. And that can be to appeal to a wider, more diverse audience, or it can be to be seen as more open and inclusive, or it can be whatever shape or form that statement needs to be. I don't think necessarily from personal view, and I know everyone's different, but from personal view, it doesn't need to single out LGBTQ unless you are kind of already a really diverse business, and actually that is the only avenue you haven't yet gone properly in with. So I think it's more important to make sure you have that sort of diversity point within your marketing strategy always there. And that's exactly what we've done now. So we have it built in. It doesn't mean that we're going to have a gay couple or gay person or a trans individual in every ad we do. Absolutely not. It's the world is still fully diverse of people from all ethnicities and sexualities, and I think that needs to be represented. But it is part of our one of our core strategies, and as such, our creatives will, when they are going through ideas, they have our 5 strategies next to them. They have our brand model and strategies who feed into each other. So any response they have, they'll have to go past all those 5, one of which will be a diversity and inclusivity kind of piece of strategy. So for the right project, they might say, oh, actually, this might benefit from a gay couple or from an unexpected twist that would suit the LGBTQ community. So I think having that sort of all-encompassing strategy is important. And if you're an FMCG business, you might want a bespoke one for LGBTQ. So I dare to say you probably already have done loss in diversity for ethnicity and other things, although can always do more.
Mike, anything to add on that point?
I would just say, make sure you book your campaigns with gay media as an obvious one, but also, maybe on a technical point of view on digital campaigns as well, is that Attitude does for some reason seem to, you guys probably understand this a bit better than I do, whether it's blacklist on certain words, so certain digital ads won't appear within articles, and it can be words like gay, sexuality, which means that that's what Attitude generally most of our stories about, and we won't get digital campaigns from Tesco and people like that because they blacklisted those words. So I think maybe it's time to review those kind of backroom functions that are going on. Yeah,
I think that's actually a quite good point, because something that we recently did, I know it was an article out, I can't remember who with, let's say Pink News or something like that, how damaging that very point is for gay businesses and smaller publishers in general, because through programmatic buying, they'd often get blacklisted because the use of words that are on people's 2,000 long negative keyword list, and we used to have literally 2,000 negative keywords, including anything from some of the world's most common names to words like sex and other things that would automatically block our ads. But a large piece of project work that we did last year was actually not just review the blacklist, but then review the whitelist of sites instead. So rather than having your 10,000 whitelisted sites, which normally is the case in any kind of media group, so whether it's a dense one or group M whitelist, it's always about 10,000 sites. And I think the argument can easily be had is, are there really 10,000 sites that like 95% of the population go on to? Or is it like 100 sites that our target audience would frequently go on to, or that we can promote and put them all into a private marketplace instead of having a completely wide targeting? So we did a big project where we basically did exactly that. We went from 10,000 whitelisted sites to about 100, and we went from 2,000 negative keywords to 20. And the sort of gut reaction is that, okay, well, that's going to make your cost per unique visitor much more expensive and all that kind of thing. Yeah, it did. The cost per unique visitor went up nearly threefold, I think, or at least twofold. But the cost per engaged online visitor, so that's something we measure, is have they done something on site? Have they configured a car? Have they gone through more pages? That actually cost per engaged visitor went down by 25%. So what that shows is that we essentially removed all the dead weight that you often have online. So all the kind of bot traffic you have from many of those already whitelisted sites completely disappeared. So whilst we have theoretically fewer unique visitors, we now have more real unique visitors. And that's something that the likes of integral ad science, I think, can never measure. Like in terms of ad blocking and measurement on ad fraud, we can only measure what happened last year, basically, because any online crime in terms of fraudulent traffic will always come, they'll always be 2 steps ahead of us. So we can only show and point those out. So I'm personally very happy with that, because that means we're now not blocking any traffic from the likes of gay media. They're all part of our 100 site list.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I know that's something that as a network we've started to look into, as to how we can help people manage blacklisting and whitelisting better. I think we are all guilty of, and me as someone that's worked in the digital kind of side of things for a long time, as we've inherited blacklists that are very out of date and definitely need kind of bringing up to speed with actually what's happening. And we're guilty of blocking a lot of traffic from very kind of high quality sites because of those negative keywords that we apply. I think we've got time for a couple more questions. Kind of one that's coming from Mark. Any particular brands that you admire in regards to their approach to diversity within marketing? Mike, I'll go to you first on that one.
It's one that's close to us. Virgin and Virgin Atlantic, for a hell of a long time, we talk about brand authenticity, and the story of Virgin and Richard Branson and their support for the gay community goes back decades. They're not a brand or an organisation, because it kind of applies to all the Virgin brands, that can be accused of pinkwashing. Richard's support through charitable foundations for LGBT people is kind of, he set up a charitable foundation, I think, in the early 1970s. During the 1980s in London, he owned Heaven nightclub when it wasn't fashionable, due to kind of the AIDS crisis that was going on, to have any kind of gay businesses. But Virgin owned Heaven nightclub, which was a safe space for LGBT people back then. So I think they're somebody that I've always admired. I used to work for Virgin back myself in the late 1980s. And as a young gay man, it was a fantastic place to work in London. It was one of my first jobs there. So I think, the kind of the Virgin, although they are the headline sponsor for the Attitude Awards, they are somebody that I always admire. I think they can, they certainly can put a rainbow flag on their brand and claim authenticity with that.
Markus, what about yourself?
Yeah, I was going to use Virgin as one of my examples as well, but besides Virgin, I think a brand that with authenticity can put the rainbow flag on any of their products is Absolute Vodka. Just like many alcohol brands today, if you go to the alcohol shelves during Pride Month, there's special editions Pride bottles of virtually every large alcohol brand now. But actually, if you look back to all the way back when, 80s, 90s, actually the only brand has always stood with one of the earliest sponsors of Pride, one of the first editions of anything, has always been Absolute. They're always there. They're not afraid of putting their money where their mouth is. Yeah, you might see it most during June, but they have done that since long before it was fashionable to do so. So the sort of youth of today, they might not know that, they might not see that, they might see it's a marketing ploy that, oh, here's Absolute again doing things during Pride Month, but actually they have been doing that for virtually as long as Pride Month has existed. And I think that shows a level of commitment. I personally have at least one of their 2008 Pride bottles.
I also have one of their Pride bottles somewhere on a shelf.
Yeah, and I proudly keep that, because I've been around that bottle for ages, because it's authentic. Not saying that when the other sort of vodka brands do the same, that's not also good. I'm for anyone wanting to put a rainbow on things. Just Absolutely done it authentically for a much longer period of time. Other brands I can see they've done nice things recently, more from an advertising perspective, is actually a competitor of ours. So Volvo started not as early as us. I still claim that we were the first premium car brand to do anything sort of high profile with the LGBT community. But I saw during Volvo's launch of, I believe, the V60 or something like that, they introduced the new family model as their TV campaign, and within that they featured, I believe, both a gay and lesbian couple, including not just what you normally see, these sort of young beautiful couple, but actually they had like an older guys in sort of a, it couldn't be translated in any way. They basically sat holding each other in a sofa whilst showing the new car as a new family model. They did a few PR stunts, I believe on Westfield, something like that, but they changed a few of these signs on parking spaces. You know, like they had a family parking spaces.
Yeah.
They changed a few of the icons on those to like man kid, woman kid, and so on, within the launch campaign of the new family model, as they say. And I thought that was really nice, sweet campaign to have done. I know they did some sort of mainstream print advertising using just iconography of the sort of the symbol for same-sex marriage and things like that. So I think they've done some really nice symbolic work. I can't speak for what they do internally, but being Swedish myself, I dare to say that Volvo is probably fairly liberal and open-minded in their internal views. So yeah, competitor, but I believe they have done some really quite nice work.
Oh, I'm gonna wrap up on a final question that's coming from Michael, who says that he was surprised around some of the earlier comments on authenticity, especially in context of companies that have got it wrong in the past. Question, I'll start with you, Mike. How far do you think kind of advertising in the UK community has come for incorporating diversity and inclusion?
I think it's got better, but it's still got a long way to go. I think that particular cruise company, I don't think that would happen today, if I'm honest. I think it seemed like such a spectacular own goal that it just feels like it wouldn't happen with everything that's gone on. It was probably about 5-6 years ago. So I think, I would say that things have definitely moved on. I think marketing professionals are definitely more engaged. Diversity is certainly up the priority of things, but there's still a lot that can be done. You know, I still look at whether it's print ads or press ads or TV ads, and I rarely see myself looking back at me. So I think for other minorities out there, I think it must be even worse. So I think there's a hell of a lot that needs to be done still.
Markus, anything to add?
No, I completely agree. I think we have come a lot further. I believe people are now more aware. Will there be businesses, smaller ones most likely, that don't have as experienced marketing teams, but they haven't done things where they have had PR backlashes necessarily? Anything from your local garden center, even if they're part of a chain, or sort of building companies, businesses that don't normally do things very publicly, can they get things wrong because they have an inexperienced marketing team that isn't diverse? Very likely. Do I think they do it with bad intentions? No, I think they do want to show support, and while some people do tone deaf things, I think often the intention behind it and the idea is good. And I suppose our job is, on the one hand, to advertise for our own business, but also to be helpful. And I think I'm more than happy to speak to other businesses who just want to, if they want to run an idea by me or check anything, I'm more than open for that. I think when it comes to LGBT advertising, all we can do is help each other as a community as well. And if we want to be angry with someone for having had a tone deaf ad, rather than rinsing them on Twitter over it, why don't you just email their marketing department or try and get in contact with someone and educate and see what they could have done differently and what made them offended or whatever it might have been. Because I truly believe it's not the intention of anyone in 2020, at least. I may very well be wrong. There may be some homophobic person somewhere who is in charge of a marketing department and wants to, but I'd like to think that we've come further than that in 2020.
Yeah, cool. I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you both so much for joining us today to kick off PrideFest. I think, you know, there's been some great takeaways around kind of how we've worked in the media space to bring to life a very, you know, full rounded journey for Jaguar Land Rover. And I think, you know, there is definitely work we've still got to do, and that's why we're here today with these kind of events. And for the rest of the week, we want engagement on these topics. We want kind of to celebrate what's happening in this space, but also to kind of make sure that we're educating and informing. I think, as both Mike and Markus so eloquently put there, it's about how we evolve and move forward together as a community. So please check in your diaries for the events for the rest of the week. I think Channel 4 is speaking at the same time tomorrow. And if you have any questions, please let the And Proud team know. There's a dedicated And Proud Steerco email address, or you can drop myself an email, or Lee maybe, as the two co-chairs. Thanks very much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, it's me, Cheddar Gorgeous, and this is Jag Race. We're about to meet two drag queen heroes, and they're not the brightest. Each fame-hungry, attention-seeking publicity queen, with what dignity they have left, will climb aboard a rather beautiful 100% all-electric Jaguar I-Pace. They will race along our private test track over a standing quarter-mile. The runner-up, let's call her our loser, will win £2,000 for a charity of their choice. The winner proceeds to the grand final and the chance to win £10,000 for a charity of their choice, and the prospect of meeting a major television personality. If it's somebody from Love Island, may the winner mow me down on the way home. But first, we need a starter and a waver of our checkered flag. For this, we have our tool boys. Generic, but in possession of the requisite tools at least. So, let's meet our two contestants.